So yesterday I uploaded a video talking about Fisher, the well-known DJ and producer, potentially having a ghostwriter. So I read an article and it basically gave you some proof that the first two tracks, Stop It and You're Kidding by Fisher, were actually also co-produced by Chris Lake, who's another massive DJ. So it got me thinking, right? What other DJs have ghost producers? If it can't just be Fisher. It has to be more, A lot of producers release a lot of tracks a year and they're also touring all year. How do they have time to do it all? So there must be some producers that get some help with producing tracks. So I actually did a little bit more research and found some more artists that apparently have ghost producers. So there's actually a website dedicated to it called theghostproduction.com. And on this little mini article, it gives you a list of potential EDM and dance music DJs that don't create their own music. It apparently says that DVBBS, Dubs, I don't know if that's how you say it, Timmy Trumpet, Steve Aoki, Hannah Wants, Milli Vanilli, Tiesto, the Stafford Brothers, Tiger Lee, Marcus Schultz, and Diplo apparently have been well known and have been outed as having ghost producers co-produce their tracks. So I think that it's an interesting talking point that, are these DJs making their own music? Because to the common person, to just an average fan, we know no different. They release a track and we don't question who made it. We just assume that the person who made it is the person releasing it. But reading this article, it's become kind of quite clear that these DJs don't have enough time to tour the world every single day and create high quality, well mastered, mass appealing music. It's a hard skill as it is. And someone like Calvin Harris, for example, who is very well known for producing massive hits time and time again, doesn't really tour that often. You'll very rarely see him in the UK. Doesn't really tour that much in America. He spends most of his time in the studio because that's his form of art. That's how he likes to express himself. He doesn't like the DJing side of it too much. So it is quite a awkward situation where you tour in the world so much. How do you have so much time to make these music? And of course, the answer is, well, people probably don't. It's definitely no surprise that artists have other people master their tracks. That's no secret, right? If you make a tune, the likeliness is that someone else is going to master that for you. People who have studied and are experts in mastering tracks, and they just sit there and finely tune all the EQs, all the effects just to make it sound perfect. Artists don't really have an ear for that. They have more of an ear for creating melodies, creating the bass lines, creating the highs and the lows of the track, not really about those intricacies that take time. So that's no surprise. But how far are these ghost producers going? How far are people getting help with their tracks? Is it a case of, well, listen, they're no longer making the melodies, they're no longer making the bass lines, people are doing that for them. And all they're doing is they're putting their name to the track and releasing it under their name and getting all the credit for it. Maybe that's the case. It's hard to say, because in the industry, if let's say somebody makes a track, let's say just a ghost producer makes a track and they offer it to a Diplo or a Steve Aoki, basically once Diplo or Steve Aoki or the record label buys that track off the ghost producer, that ghost producer owns no rights to the track. He owns nothing. He owns nothing about it. So he cannot come on record and say, oh yeah, I made that track, because he could potentially get sued for that and lose the money that he did make from that as part of the contract, I'm sure. So realistically, it's kind of one of those crimes that's undetectable. You can't actually find out who's made what. It's very kind of sneaky. It's quite interesting, really, because someone could have released a track and you will never ever know whether they made it or a ghost producer made it, or who even had their finger on that to try and make that track as good as possible. I think all you've got to do is you've got to just trust in the artists, trust in people that you kind of know produce and master their own tracks. Someone like Laid Back Luke, for example, is high profile for making all his own tracks and mastering all his own tracks. And even him, I'm sure he gets a little bit of help mastering and filling out some bits sometimes and working on certain collabs and stuff, because, it's a hard business to be in. And music is an art form, music is an expression, and it should be shared with other people. Working by yourself, I'm sure, can get quite stale, and having a fresh pair of hands, fresh pair of, you know, thoughts come in and help that song out, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that the problem is when an artist buys a track that maybe isn't theirs at all, and they release it under their name, and they take all the credit for that, and they act like it's their baby and they created that. I think that's where the problem comes in. Apparently, you know, the list of people here have had well-known run-ins with ghost producers, and they're kind of known for not producing their own tracks, which is surprising because people like Diplo, I thought this guy was a well-educated producer who'd created loads of tracks, you know, Major Lazer, Jack U, all these other projects. I thought this guy was the real deal. Maybe he is. Maybe that's just 1 or 2 tracks in his early days, or maybe just get some help mastering tracks. That's what we talked about yesterday with the Fisher video. You know, if it is Chris Lake, if it is some other ghost producer we've never heard of, does it really matter? Because whoever is doing it is creating really good music and we're all loving it. Just because it comes out in the Fisher name and he's the personality behind the music, does that tarnish the reputation? Does that make the music any worse? I don't think it does. You know, it doesn't really matter who's producing the music. It doesn't really matter who is perfecting and mastering and doing all the elements, you know, the small little intricacies of the music. It doesn't matter. As long as the music is good and as long as the music is well mastered and it sounds good on a big pair of speakers and it sounds good in your headphones, who cares who makes that? Who cares whose name it comes out under? Music is music at the end of the day, and it's an art form, it's an expression. It shouldn't really matter about who creates it. Obviously, people might feel a little bit scammed where, you know, they feel like the artist they've been following maybe hasn't been truthful with them, or that, you know, they're not as creative or they're not as kind of good as they thought they was. And that's fine. I can understand that side of the argument. I could understand that point of view. But at the end of the day, you know, if you would be silly not to get help in if you needed it. If you was creating tracks and they weren't good enough and they weren't up to scratch, and there was somebody that could help you make that track as good as possible, why wouldn't you get that help? It doesn't make sense to me. Especially if you're at the top of the game, you know, you're making hits, you've got loads of fans. If there's someone that can help you make your fans happy, and there's someone that can help you elevate your career, earn more money, you know, climb up the rankings on like the DJ, you know, mag rankings, someone that can help you headline a festival just by helping you produce a little bit of music, why wouldn't you do that? Especially when there's so much money in the game. You know, it makes sense, you know, to do that. What this does make me realize is that people who do create their own music and do produce, spend all the time in the studio, and they spend time on the plane, traveling while they're producing, and it's, you know, this absolute kind of chaos schedule that most people, DJs have, still find time to produce. They're the ones that deserve the utmost respect. I know people like Skrillex produce all their own music. As I said, Laid Back Luke, Camel Fat. These guys produce their own music while on tour. They spend time in the studio. Very interesting talking point. You know, I hope it's something that maybe has sparked a little bit of a discussion for yourself. It's definitely something that I'm going to think about moving forward a little bit more. You know, who's making this track? Oh, does it sound like the last tracks he's made, or has it got some different influence on there? And I'm definitely going to be doing some more research and maybe trying to find out some maybe ghost producers that have produced some really big tracks that maybe have a consistent level of like making bangers that no one really knows about, because I bet there is some out there, and it'll be interesting to know who they are and kind of see what the library is of ghost produced tracks. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later. Make sure you subscribe and like the video, share it with whoever you want to.